And the new washer has made it in the mail. Question as to whether we should run these wet or dry. In the reels that I tend to splash in water, I tend to run them wet, and by wet we put Shimano Ace2 grease. So Ace2 is for overhead reels, okay, bait casting, as well as for gear. It's in Japanese, so I figured out what that was and I wrote it there. Shimano grease used to come in tubs. Now it only comes in tubes. It's the same grease really. You could use Kel's drag grease if you'd like. I use this grease both on the drags as well as in the gears. I don't know if Kel's is any good for gears. I lent mine to someone, it didn't come back, so I ended up with the Shimano grease. It works great. You could probably also get away with any type of marine grease. So now we're just going to stick this drag disc into the spool. Okay, with the wet drags, the startup drag is a little bit higher. If you run them dry, you could actually have a very low feathered drag. It's less sticky in the beginning. Everything's been cleaned up, so now I'm going to seal everything and reassemble the reel. Well, not everything is cleaned up. Corrosion X to where I don't want to have a lot of resistance. In my left side place, I've re-lubed most of the stuff. I try not to lube plastics. We have a plastic gear here. That's for the spider gear. So I've applied grease pretty much everywhere. For the spider gear, I use the spray type grease. Sometimes I use spray type grease in places that I maintain without having to open up. For example, in a reel like this, I might use the spray grease to get into the main gear, the main drive gear, without having to open it up. Yeah, so I don't do that. I don't open my reels up every trip. Maybe once every few trips. I've cleaned up, applied, taken out the old grease, applied new grease, and pretty much wiping everything down where it shouldn't have any grease. And now I'm going to reassemble everything. Remember that this particular thread is very fine, so you're going to make sure you've got it lined up perfectly before you tighten it up. This is nicely lined up and that's hand tightened. Okay, you don't want to have to use tools to open this up. Prevents the water from going in, and that's really all you need. Now we're going to reassemble everything. Okay, for reassembling this part of the spool, you're going to make sure that the pin gear, I don't know what you call these pieces, but you're going to make sure that this pin is centered. Otherwise, it doesn't fit into the slot that you see in the base of this reel, or actually on the left side plate. Okay, so I line it up and I drop it in, and if it doesn't fit in, then we rotate it a little bit until it slots into the groove. You'll know when it fits because the fit will be very positive. Okay, so there it goes, it went in. You can feel that it engages the line level. So when you turn the reel, that plastic gear actually drives the level wind, or the line level. New bearing's got to go in. We're going to clean out this grease and re-lube it, and then we will slot this one back in so gloves come back on. So stuck the new bearing in, then apply a little bit more grease. Next we put the main drive gear back in. And notice that the dogs are actually built into the main drive gear, the anti-reverse dogs. And I'm trying to get the dogs to engage, which they won't. Okay, and you do need to hear that positive snap. Otherwise, when you reassemble this reel, and I think there's one or two other Shimano reels that are the same, you basically need to push the anti-reverse dog out of the way, and you know it's out of the way when it snaps into place. and you can see that there's very little gap between the main drive gear and the thrust bearing. Okay, so basically everything fits in a very narrow profile. Okay, so the nice thing about wearing gloves is just by touching anything, you're basically applying grease. Okay, and that goes into place. Okay, so don't need the gloves anymore, the rest can be done by hand. I don't know if you want to watch me put the screws back in. Probably fast forward this part. It's also important that when we're putting screws in, that you don't tighten them as you put them in. You want to make sure that everything is lined up properly first, and you want to tighten them in alternate fashion. It's engineering discipline. There's a very good reason for it, and that's so that you don't strip any of the threads. So these screws are going in very lightly, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to tighten the opposite screws in that order. Okay, so they're all just finger tight, and when I cinch them down, okay, to the end of the threads, and then I might give it a little bit more just so that I can feel the bite. So I'm doing opposites. Okay, that's all that you need. It doesn't need to be any tighter than that. Okay, so right now the lever drag assembly will go in, and the handle will go in, and we're pretty much done with this reel. Okay, so one trick with this particular reel is this little catch over here, that if we put the lever drag guide plate, the one that guides this lever, on first, then you're going to have problems putting the lever drag lever in. Okay, there's a little slot that needs to fit into. So we assemble these together loosely first before we put in the screws to fix the plate. And remember that the two of the screws actually come with a plastic collar, which is removable, and we took particular care not to lose them. So we put those back in. Again, we don't cinch them all at once. We kind of put all the screws in first, and then we alternate the pressure that we torque the screws down with. Okay, we'll put in the drag cam. That's the one that provides the drag curve. And then we put in the preset knob. And we'll adjust how much drag we want later on using the preset knob. Okay, that's always done in free spool. You ramp it up using the lever. So in this particular case, I can feel it's a little bit tight there. So that's too much pressure. The handle of the reel will actually prevent the preset knob from flying off, because it kind of physically impedes the falling off of that knob. So we've decided to, I've decided to stick with this particular handle. It is, I believe it is a Shimano handle, but it's not the original one that came with this reel. I can put on any other Shimano reel. Okay, actually, I don't think this is a Shimano. It's a Shimano knob. Okay, but this piece I'm not sure if it's a Shimano because one of these holes is bigger than the other, and it doesn't look like it's a Shimano size for drive gear. So I can see that the previous owner has really abused his equipment. So a bit of corrosion here. I could get it off, but I'm not going to do it at this point. I want to make sure that I'm 100% happy with the wheel first. I should probably stick some grease in there. Since this was one of the parts that was really corroded. In fact, if you remember, I had to kind of try and hammer at it to get it off. Where we have dissimilar metals in contact with each other, that's where you're more likely to see any type of corrosion. We had a really small nut here that was also seized up. What I've decided to do was, let me get rid of that. Thanks to the Aviation Authority in Singapore, I'm no longer using some of my drones, and it so happened that that's a 5mm nut. So it has a 5mm bolt. 4.8 is about 5. And I happen to have a drone that uses a lock nut, and these lock nuts are fantastic for salt. They're stainless steel, high quality. Okay, that's nice and purple too. It's got a cool color in it. It doesn't have to be very tight because this is a locking nut. It has got a plastic sleeve there. As long as you run through the plastic sleeve, you know, for one or two complete threads, it's not going to come off. So now we're going to add a little bit of drag. See that the reel is so much better, even at a heavier drag setting. I got no stickiness at all. The reel's all cleaned up. I've replaced the main truss bearing, as well as re-lubed everything. I've re-lubed the line guide. I've cleared up the reel foot from corrosion. Most of the corrosion is all gone. I've yet to try out this reel. I've chosen to go with the handle that was sold together with this reel because there's a nice big hole here in the handle where I can stick a small hook, which in Singapore are small, so a 6/0 hook is perfect. I can dangle it there with a sinker, and I'm not scared of scratching up a nice handle like I have on this one. This is my jigging reel, so here they are side by side. I can start off the day by jigging, and if I get tired, I can decide I can stick a smaller livey or a dead bait on this one. And yeah, it's got a nice clicker that this one doesn't have because this is a purely jigging reel. Alright, thank you very much. Like the video if you thought this was helpful for you, and I'll see you on the water.